G'day guys, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today, as the title suggests, I want to go through about parallax. Something that I've mentioned a fair few times, something I've seen lots of videos about, but nowhere where I've seen it fully explained at the levels that you can go to with it. First of all, where is it relevant? Well, pretty much on any rifle scope. Some you can adjust it, some you can't. You should always be aware of it, you should always understand it, and you should always be checking for it to varying degrees. And I'll start to go through that a little bit once I've been a little bit more explaining. Parallax, what is it? Well, okay, there's a very simple thing is what it is. It is probably the most important bit about what a rifle scope is. And that is, a rifle scope is essentially two things. One, it gives you vision, whether that's zoomed in vision, so you get more power in your vision. It gives you clarity, it gives you that side of things, but it gives you vision. The other thing, and the most important thing a rifle scope gives you, is an aiming point. Now that aiming point is the bit that has to be straight, because that's what a rifle's doing. In an iron sights or something where you have a front and rear sight, you're lining the two up. In a rifle scope, it's lining itself up. So what you need it to do is do that accurately. Now where parallax comes involved is that the way a rifle scope works, through the various lenses inside here, there is a point which is called the focal plane, but there's a point where your image actually comes together as its focus point. Now that point changes, you go through different distances you're looking at, where you actually focus everything to make it work. That point changes in the scope. The parallax is adjusting so that your reticle lines up with the same place as your focal plane. So the image that you're looking at and your reticle are in exactly the same place. If one is in a different place to the other, then as you can imagine, if you look from front to rear, if one's in a different place to the other, if one is forward and one is back, when I look from the side, from either side, I'll find that one is moving in difference to the other. So whether you see it as your target moving and your reticle staying the same, or you see it as your target staying the same and your reticle moving around, it's because the two aren't lined up and you're looking from behind and they're in a different plane. When they're in the same plane, you move, the whole lot stays together, it stays fixed. Why is that relevant? Well, it's relevant because if your eye isn't exactly the same place every time you shoot, then what happens when your parallax isn't set correctly is that you then end up where you're actually aiming at different points every time your eye's in a different place. So hence, accuracy is compromised by that point. And whether that's you're shooting at 25 yards, you're shooting at 100 yards, you're shooting at 1,000 yards, you're shooting at 3,000 yards, it all is affected the same. Now, in rifle shooting, the same as in a lot of things to go with distance, the more distance you've got, the exponential the problem becomes. So a little miss at 100 yards is a big miss at 1,000 yards, which is a really big miss at 2,000 yards, and hence as we go on. So what I'm saying with that is it's more important the further range, but really it's important at every range. So what we've got to there is, that's what it's about. It's about your focal plane and your reticle. Now, how can you correct that? Well, there's a couple of things you should do. One is, in one of the schools that I've always gone to, there's various things that I go with, but one of them I always check my parallax. And that's a very simple thing to do. You want to have the rifle positioned at the target and where you are not supporting it. It's a very important thing about checking parallax. You are not supporting it. I do things a little bit differently. Just bear with me a second, I'll grab a little tool. So what I've used here is my adjustable bag base. It means that I can adjust the rifle around to be able to set it up where I can get it pointing directly at target. It's very important to make sure that you are completely disconnected. You do not want to be holding the rifle. You don't want to be touching the rifle in effect. Because when we try and move our head around, if you're holding it in any form, it's really hard to not make another part of your body move, to not make things move, and then you can get inaccurate view. So you want to make sure the rifle is dead still in whatever form you're doing it. So set up on a bench rest system, in whatever form, you make sure that rifle is dead still, then you move your eye around behind here. So I put together some images here, and you can see in one format there, you see the image of your eye moving around behind, and you can see that the reticle is moving not as much, but in the same direction as the movement of your eye versus the scope. I put together another image here where you see it's still moving, but it's moving in the opposite direction. So you can see all that, that's moving in the opposite direction. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. And then this last image here where you see the same of your eye moving around, but everything is staying dead still. The reticle is staying seemingly fixed to the target. That means your parallax is set correctly. Now, a quick nutshell of that, I'm not going to get too complicated about it because it does get complicated. If it's moving with the target, where the reticle is moving not as much, but moving with where your scope is moving, it's still moving away from the actual target, but it's moving with the scope. That suggests that it is behind, and I won't, like I said, won't do too complicated, but that is talking whether the focal plane is forward or back of the reticle. It means back, but I won't get too much into that. And when it's moving the opposite direction as the next image, means it's moving on the other side, which is a little bit of which way around the reticle and the focal plane are joined together. Something that can, if you understand it, it can help knowing where you've got to adjust and when you're trying to set things up. But other than that, it doesn't really matter too much. If it's wrong, it's wrong. You want it to be all still and lined up together. So that is what I suggest, even on something that's not adjustable, to check it. I tend to make it as a habit as my first things of checking with the shoot, so that I know I'm going to go for this. I make sure, it's one of the things that I sort of naturally do, is check that my parallax is set correctly and adjust it. Not trusting focus and going to, and certainly not trusting the measurements on the side, but going to where I'm actually checking that and see that it's right. Certainly it affects us even more so when we're at extreme long range or ultra long range and focus isn't so easy to find. We're struggling with the air and that side of things, so checking parallax really works. But, and I suppose that's the very simple basics of it. The thing I really would like to point out, which is well, I suppose there's two things that are most important that I see missed a lot. One is just how important parallax is. The amount of people trying to shoot a group, trying to shoot precision shooting, and they've got everything else right in the box, and they haven't got their parallax properly set, it really does affect your groups. And like I said, 50 yards or 100 yards, it really does affect your groups. Super important to get right. The next bit, and really the most important detail of setting up a scope right from the beginning, is focusing your diopter, or actually focusing your reticle. Now, that is the most important thing you should do. The best way to do that is with ignoring your image in the front to start off with. Now, what I mean by that is look at a clean wall, look at the sky, look at something else, and then with this sort of thing, you've got to undo the lock ring, but whatever the particular scope is get your reticle as cleanly focused as possible. Now, I tend to do this in a step-by-step process, and I'll keep going back and fine-tuning and trying to get it spot on. But the simple way to start is do that. So put it against a clean wall in the house, put it against the sky, something where you're not focusing on the lens, and go through and get that as accurately focused as possible. Now, keep in mind our human eye is always fighting us here, or helping us is what it's doing. It's focusing on things, and we can actually start to, if we don't know what's actually going on, it can be that we are adjusting for what that is and trying to make focus of it. So it's good to look away and clear things up, look back again, and make sure that looks sharp focus as soon as you sort of hit it. But you go through whatever process you need to make sure that is clean and focused. And in truth, that is one of the most important details of getting your parallax right at the end of the day. But if you get that focus cleanly, very cleanly, then the next step is to go and get yourself, especially and really ideally, you use yourself a nice, clean, sharp day. You know, set up for something at 100 yards, 200 yards, 50 yards, it doesn't really matter, but set up something to where once you've got this focused nicely by looking at the sky, then you go down and make sure that that is all working properly with where you set up and use your parallax adjustment, focus adjustment, whatever you want to call it, but you use the actual image focus to make sure that's nice and clean. Now, if you've generally, with a good quality scope, if you have focused your diopter correctly, so you've focused your reticle to a super clean and crisp image, you've got that to where it's exactly where it should be, then you'll generally find that you can use the parallax as a focus knob. Ideally, you want to get to where you can dial it on, to where you get a nice clean image, and when you check, the parallax is right. And if it isn't, it is worthwhile putting a bit of effort into that in the way of setting up your scope. Because you may find that you'll just need to spend a little bit more time. I've certainly been there sometimes and done that, where you reset this and get to where adjust this focus a little bit here, try again here, and you get to where it works. Ideally, if you get it really right, especially for shooting in normal ranges out to probably 1,500 yards and on good weather, you can actually focus this, and when you check your parallax, it's right. Which means in the instance when you need to in a hurry, whether that's hunting or that's in a match or that sort of stuff, you can just focus and you know your parallax is on or close enough to perfect. It is a process that I tend to, on a shot that really matters, I'll always go through and double check. And if you find you're focusing and finding that your parallax is not correct, then you'll probably find that your diopter focus down the back here is not working like it should. You haven't got that set up quite right. It is something that and this is something that I haven't done a lot of in the early years. I didn't do a lot of, and putting that effort into making sure this focus is dead right, and then you'll tend to find that you're just going to where you get a crisp and clean focus, you'll find that your parallax is right. Worthwhile doing some playing with. There's some other things that I've done over the years, and some of the old habits of lesser quality scopes and things we used to do from many years ago, and that would be the likes of using scope shadow. Scope shadow, what I'm talking about, I'll do an image so you can see here, is when ideally we want a full picture. We take it out to where it's nice and bright and clean image. But if you come back a little bit, so where your eye relief is a little bit back or a little bit forward from where it should be, you start to get the fuzzy image around the outside edge. It's one of the tricks that we used to do to not have to worry about parallax in something that was broken or something that wasn't so easy to mess with, something wasn't so easy to fix. And by having that scope ring and getting that dead centered, so that is the thing that tells you the eyes are at the right place. If it's off to one side, moves around at all, it means you move your eye to where you get that dead centered, then your two images have to be dead lined up. And it is a trick that works for some people. Really, this day and age, we've got the scopes, we've got the boards, we've got everything set up to where everything is so nice. Why not have that full picture? And getting your parallax right is the right way to do it, but it is an old trick that can certainly help with this sort of stuff. Anyway, I think that's about a list of what I wanted to go through. The parallax, what it is your focal plane and your reticle not being exactly the same place. So the image and the reticle are not on each other, and that means that you have this, as your eye goes to different places, you get a different point of image. So that's what parallax is. Adjusting it is super, super important for accuracy. No matter what distance you're shooting at, if your target, the same as if you've got a handgun and a front and rear sight, and if this one just keeps moving to a different place, you'll shoot all over the place. Well, that's effectively what's happening when you're talking about parallax, and you are just in behind here. Your eye can be in a tiny different position. The perfect cheat world, the perfect situation, okay, you can get it all right. Being any normal human, you'll find that it isn't always perfect, and getting that parallax right can be, listen, I will absolutely guarantee you there's people that have spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on load development when their biggest issue was the parallax wasn't set properly on their rifle. And those images, the front and rear, which way they're moving, yes, there is a whole mass to it. My honest call on it is just get it to where it doesn't move. Just adjust it to where it doesn't move. And I suppose the bit I really wanted to bring to everyone was that 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, you can put the effort in to where your focus ring or your parallax adjustment if you've set it up properly and you dial that to where you got a crisp image, your parallax will be right. I would always suggest to double check, and my process nowadays is I'm always checking it, but I'm finding I'm not having to adjust things. Whereas when I wasn't set up properly, I would just be messing around with that to get that just right. And the more effort I put into setting my diopter or focusing my reticle, the less that's been an issue. Lastly, I will say, if the shot really super matters, it's a one-shot hit you're trying to do, it's a match group, it's got any questions, double check, go back, wave your head around a little bit, look at that image, make sure that's staying still. It's a really important thing. It is a real key to increasing accuracy. Anyway, guys, I hope that's some worth to some people. I hope that makes some sense.